Hi, everyone. Welcome to Well Coded Woman. I'm Nissy, and I started Well Coded Woman to focus on making women's health, hormones, and health data more understandable and accessible. Today, I'm joined by Sushma Ravindran. She is the co founder of AskNomi. She has 10 years of experience in tech, specifically in consumer and digital health at companies like ZocTalk, Verywell Health, MindBody, and Dash Meredith, a second time founder with lived experience in endometriosis. She brings both professional expertise and her personal insight to the work with transforming care for women with a condition known as endometriosis. A little bit about AskNomi. AskNomi is an AI-enabled end-to-end care platform for people with endometriosis. It goes from symptom tracking to clinic, combining symptom intelligence with evidence-based proof, and it also has one-to-one clinical care to help patients get to a better health. Their mission is to get women to better health to accessible healthcare. Today, we'll be talking about endometriosis, pelvic health, symptom tracking, and why data matters so much in women's healthcare. Hi, Sushma.
Hi. Hi, Nissy.
First, thank you so much for being here. And I love to start with your story. What led you to ask Nomi? And do you have a personal story that made you start this?
Yeah. Thank you for having me, Nissy. Of course, like most other founders in the women's health space, it did start from a personal story. I was dealing with severe migraines a couple of years ago and really weird fainting episodes. And that prompted me to go back to like the doctor space and try to get answers to what was going on. And after a lot of cardiologists, neurologists, and other healthcare providers I've seen, and now when I count, it's actually over 30 doctors that I've seen since
Oh,
I've
wow.
had the initial onset of the symptoms when I was 12 years old to now, just to get answers to those specific symptoms tied back to what I now realize is endometriosis.
Mhm.
Once I had a name for it, I was able to understand that all of the debilitating cramps I had that basically disabled me to 2 days a month was actually tied back to these migraines and the fainting episode and everything else that I was having. The root of all of it was that one word for me, which was endo.
What was the hardest part about like navigating through your symptoms early on?
I would say normalizing it. I normalized it, right? And I write about this on my Substack as well. It's like I have two sisters. I have friends and family in healthcare as well. And since I was 12, I would just be disabled 2 days a month with excruciating pain. I would be throwing up. We went to a lot of doctors to try to get answers. We didn't get answers. So we got stuck in that cycle of dismissal. Like you normalize it at home, you normalize it with your friends. Then you go to a doctor, and the doctor is like, no, it's part of being a woman. Then you're back into that cycle of, oh, okay. And I think the scariest part for me was that I was told that I have low pain tolerance. It might be in my head. Like these types of things, when you hear as like a young teenager, you sort of like think it's something wrong with you
Yeah.
and you stop asking the questions. And I think that's the part that is very dangerous and probably where I feel like I let myself down the hardest. Because when I had a name for it and I had gone through all of this and I figured it out, it was so emotional, but also very, very, very satisfying. And I know that's a weird word to use when you talk about getting a diagnosis, but it's like, oh my God, I wasn't crazy. Like, all of this makes sense, you know?
Yeah.
So I think the hardest part is just rebuilding that like trust in yourself, but also knowing that this is what you have. And then the journey is not over there, right? And we can talk about that a little bit more as we're going into it. But yeah,
Yeah, I think so many women will relate to that experience, especially feeling dismissed or unheard. So, what was like that moment when, how did all of it come together and you were diagnosed that you have endo?
yeah. So it was very interesting because my older sister actually told me that I could have endo years before I got my diagnosis.
Mm.
And the symptoms I was presenting with that prompted me to go see doctors was actually not very obviously endometriosis related. So it was more neurological, it felt like at the time. I got diagnosed with something called POTS before I got my endo diagnosis. But while I was going through that journey, another friend of mine was like, hey, I think I did this like investigative journalism piece on endometriosis, and it sounds very similar. So I found an endometriosis specialist who does not take insurance, is completely out of pocket. And at that time, I was like, you know what? I will pay anything to get this answer. And so I ended up going to that specialist, and he recommended that I get surgery because he could see in the ultrasound that he did for me that I potentially had endometriosis. So I spent $20,000 to get a surgery. And that year alone, I would have spent $30,000 out of pocket to just get that answer that I had endo.
Wow, that's a staggering amount to just get the diagnosis. And I'm sure later it has its own course, and even navigating through like the healthcare system and just the gap in the diagnosis part. So I mean, finding an is it that hard to find a specialist, or
It is very difficult to actually get to that point of, oh, I need to see this specialist and I'm going to do it on my own. What's even worse is since there's not much research into the disease itself, it's really hard to find a doctor that you can trust because there's so much conflicting information out there on the internet. So it's not even finding the a special going to a specialist or knowing you need to go to a specialist. It's finding the right specialist, but also access to like financing because most of these good specialists they don't take insurance and it's very expensive. So it's like it's a huge burden on a patient to try to figure this out on their own. And the sad truth is, we're all desperate. So we keep falling into those holes of trusting someone and then getting burned.
yeah? So what led you to start AskNomi?
All of this, to be honest, I've been paying attention to the femtech space since I got my diagnosis, just to understand more about endo and how to manage it as a patient, because it's a lifelong disease with no cure. So I was very curious, like, what do we know about it? How has that information changed? What are people doing about it? And why is care so expensive? So it all came down to this one moment for me of, okay, there is not enough information out there. This is a disease that has been fairly under researched and is as prevalent as diabetes in the same target population. So it's not a rare disease. And if you peel the onion of what's going on and why endometriosis didn't get taken so seriously, it's because it was a women's health problem.
Yeah.
And until it started affecting fertility, it kind of was invisible because it was so hard to diagnose. People didn't understand what the disease burden was on society till like it had a concrete fertility issue. And that's when it started gaining more prominence. So from it's a long-winded way of me saying that it was a timing thing for me. I had built my first company, which ended up being more consulting than marketing tech. And there was a point in that journey where I had to decide if I wanted to keep going that route or I wanted to get out and do something. And for me, it was like, okay, do I want to be a therapist? Do I want to get into like fem health investing? Do I want to join another company? And I was like making all those decisions last year in like June, July. I spoke to so many amazing people who are why I'm even doing this today. And then I ended up in like an idea fellowship. And that's where I started doing much more in depth user research around period pain. And that's the journey of how I went from, just thinking about this space to starting in fem health.
Sweet. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for doing it. So my question is, okay, so when someone gets diagnosed and for example, what does AskNomi bring to the patient or what do you guys do?
Yeah, so there are two parts to this question. One is diagnosis itself. Like a few years ago, people were only getting diagnosed after they had gone through a laparoscopic surgery because that was the only way to definitively diagnose. And it still is the only way to definitively diagnose someone with endometriosis. But as recently as Feb of this year, ACOG, which is American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, they've changed their guidelines on how you can diagnose someone with endometriosis by saying you can look at someone's symptom history, understand what their cycles look like, what their how they are presenting, and clinically diagnose them with endometriosis so they can start treatment sooner. Again, surgery is still a definitive diagnosis, but this is huge because there have been so many OBGYNs I've gone to myself personally that have dismissed that endometriosis, and they're like, it's not that common sort of thing. And now that's changing in doctors' offices so more people can get diagnosed. On AskNomi, what we are building is from tracker to virtual clinic. So for someone who's coming in with that question of, okay, I have migraines and pelvic pain, we have the entire journey from tracking your symptoms, uncovering patterns, and meeting with a physician who is endo informed and can help you get that diagnosis and that clinical diagnosis and the next step. That is the pre diagnosis pathway. But our goal is ultimately, we're not here just to diagnose someone, we're here to get them to better health. So, how do we do that? We bring together evidence based care in the form of group care. So we're doing virtual group care across mind, body, and movement that has evidence and research to help with endometriosis symptoms. So pelvic floor therapy is one of them. We know that a lot of breath work is related to nervous system regulation, which is related to managing endometriosis symptoms. There's also specific yoga and meditation that can potentially help with endometriosis symptoms. And in that similar vein, you also know that nutrition and following specific diets could help with reducing inflammation overall and help with endometriosis symptoms as well. So, what we're essentially doing is we're bringing all of that together and having healthcare providers teach group care on the platform. And AskNomi has personalized protocols after every class, so you can follow along with it and improve your adherence and get to better outcomes.
That's awesome. I want to touch base on few things you talked about, especially for someone who doesn't know what pelvic health means. How would
Yeah.
you define that and also relate it a bit with endometriosis symptoms?
Sure. And this, I'm going to give a disclaimer. I'm not a pelvic floor therapist, but I will tell you from a patient perspective and building this with a pelvic floor therapist as well, what we've learned about it. So, pelvic floor are the muscles that are in between your vagina and anus, I believe. And basically, for people with chronic pelvic pain, we end up just like holding like this, right? Like in this like tight fashion when you have a lot of pain and you end up having a very tight pelvic floor, which means that it is very difficult when you're pooping or peeing. It affects pain with sex and all of those types of symptoms, urinary incontinence. Those are all related to your pelvic floor muscles and whether they're tight, whether they're weak, all of those things. As women, we go through journey to journey to journey, and we know for a fact that postpartum, that's one of the things to work on. But
Yeah.
what we don't know widely is that for a lot of people with chronic period pain, like working on your pelvic floor could drastically improve your pain symptoms.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's such a neglected part because we have exercises for every single muscle group. We have so much study, but it's still such a taboo on pelvic floor muscles, pelvic health in general, and also to be even aware and mindful of the symptoms because we always write it off as a monthly thing. And there is such a big spectrum of that where, women sometimes are almost on the bed for the whole 2 days because of the pain.
Yeah.
So more awareness of this is needed and also tying it with conditions like endometriosis, PCOS, and many other women's health disorders and issues.
I can tell you a little bit more about what we're seeing already in our pelvic floor classes. So it's been like a couple of weeks since we've been running them. And about two of the people who've been doing it for the last 4 weeks with us have already reported that they use some of the tools that they've learned in class when they're actively dealing with period pain, and they're able to relax their muscles, which is actually helping with their pain management, which is a huge, that's the kind of outcomes you want to get to consistently. But I mean, these are just anecdotal, of course, but it's still exciting to know that we're able to impact somebody's pain outcomes.
That's awesome. And what difference do you see in the group setting?
Yeah, that is a very interesting question because initially I was like, okay, how do we make something accessible and cash pay while still keeping it sustainable to have the right specialist teach it, right? Without going the insurance route yet. And so I was like, oh, yeah, we could do a group class. We could, try to change up the format and do it that way. The really cool thing about that I've noticed is that people like being there as part of the community, right? People are not shy like I expected. Okay, when we're talking about, our pelvic floor and putting a towel under our groin, it's going to be a little uncomfortable and people be shy on camera. But actually, not. People are talking about their buttholes and vagina and like what is going on, what they're feeling. And it really feels like a safe space because the other women there are also dealing with very similar symptoms as you. And the community aspect has actually become a positive as opposed to just like a neutral, which I was thinking. So that is really cool. And one of the insights that I had was, okay, yeah, this makes sense. When there is something live, there's a class, you show up and you follow along. Whereas even if you had all of the best information in the world and it was on your phone and you could do it any time of the day, would you do it? And the adherence is a lot lower. So I think our insight into that is it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, as someone in data science myself, and I personally am tracking my own health since I've been diagnosed with PCOS, I really want to talk about tracking with you. And you're also creating with AskNomi a tracking based approach. So, what's your take on that, and how is tracking beneficial for conditions like endometriosis?
Yeah, that's a great question because tracking on its own it's like we're tracking everything now with the wearables and with our data being in one place and all of that. That's amazing. But from an endometriosis PCOS standpoint, we're only scratching the surface on the research, right? So tracking is an important part of being able to stitch and close the gap on research. But from our perspective, one of the things we've realized is endometriosis is so unique to every person because it's a chronic inflammation disease, right? And so the way my symptoms show up might not be the same as somebody else's symptoms showing up. And there's a lot of comorbidities attached to it as well. And I'm not going to pretend like I'm a healthcare provider because I'm not. But one thing I will say is, as a product and a consumer person, it's so important to preserve all of the context of somebody's symptom history and understanding what these symptoms are. And even as a user, like I jokingly tell people that I name my symptoms sometimes. I call it pineapple. Like there's this like cluster of symptoms that I have that I call pineapples. I'll be like, I had another pineapple today. I just like it makes it easier, but it's also kind of funny. But that is important because if the context is not preserved, like in all of the previous tracking apps, I have headache, I have bloating, I have this, I have that, right? That's not capturing the extent of symptoms. And for us right now, it is about getting the maximum context of a user's symptoms and understanding what's going on with them so we can take that to the provider and the provider can get them to the right next point of care, And that's where I think we need to get better and we are getting better at in terms of symptom tracking because AI and technology now allows us to be able to do that in a much more accurate fashion.
Yeah, yeah. Can you shine a little bit more light on the AI based, either integration or AI based symptom tracking?
Sure. Very simply, we're using an agentic AI model, right? And we are storing people's contacts based on when they are giving us as memories. And so if I say something like, oh I'm having a lot of thigh pain radiating from my hip to my groin, then that is something that it will store as is, as opposed to just typing. So if I'm having those repeat symptoms, it also is like conversationally able to tell and like recollect. So if I say something like, I'm having that same thigh pain again, Nomi will come back to you and be like, hey, are you talking about this thigh pain that you had in X days ago or on this date? And so when you say yes, it starts to build up an understanding of
Yeah.
your symptom makeup. So that is how we're using it today. We're also using the agentic AI. I mean, it sounds like a buzzword, but it's really cool. Like after we started building it, I realized, wow, we can have a tool for this and that and this. So we store data in a very specific way, right? Like your symptom data is stored with all of the contacts and memories. Then Nomi is aware of your cycles as well. Like what kind of cycles do you have? How long are they? What is usual your normal? So it has your cycle context as well. It has your medical history context that you've given it. And it has other contexts. If you have wearable integration turned on, it has your sleep data and other things as well. And anything you report, like I ate too much cake today. Like that's a very popular one with me. It'll remember those things so it can do some correlations for you and help you understand what your entire picture looks like.
That's cool. So, kind of like dismantling the textbook way of looking at symptoms to more having a dialogue or conversation, even like, as you said, remembering. So, having this AI interface, kind of remembering something that you must have forgotten because you're now chatting with it as your journal or as your friend. So
Yeah.
it dismant like when I say the textbook style, like some of the tracking apps have like, oh, you should have a 28-day cycle, but many women don't. And then when you include more day-to-day symptoms and then track patterns in that, it does definitely even removes the confusion that I think sometimes women who go through hormonal issues face.
Yeah, exactly. And endo is um such a heterogeneous disease, right? Like it shows
Yeah.
up so differently in different people. And that's one of the things we really have designed for, which is making sure that every woman or person who has endometriosis that comes in has um, a way to enter their cycle information. Like one of the things we've heard from our users, which honestly stuck with me so hard because I'm like, oh, wow, yeah, I never thought of it that way. We always optimize our onboarding to be as easy and frictionless as possible, right? And our onboarding has a lot of questions and it asks you very specific questions about your period, like cycle information, like, are you on birth control? And we have a specific one that says, are you on continuous birth control? Which a lot of people with endometriosis are on continuous birth control. And that is a huge part of like disease management for some people, right? And having that option made so many people feel included because they were like, oh, I was like, I'm not sure if I would be able to use the app because I don't have a period anymore. And when they saw that, they were like, oh my God, like this person gets endometriosis. This is built for endometriosis. So it was a very interesting moment for us that the people we are designing for have been neglected for so long that when there is like very thoughtful why we're asking the questions, there is a strong response to, okay, I understand why and I feel seen, you know?
Yes. Yeah, that's so important. Like the fact that we are including, and as you said, each woman's experience symptoms in endo is so different. So, for example, for someone who thinks they have endo, either they saw that in their parents or they're experiencing severe pain, what are few symptoms you say that they should track just to get started?
Yeah, I think from a provider perspective, as we are doing research and building out what the provider information we give to providers should look like, just understanding by their cyclic, like where in their cycle they are or what their symptoms look like with each cycle phase is a useful tool for providers to be able to diagnose them. The second thing would be to be very explicit about symptoms, right? One of the things we make as a mistake nowadays is we go on TikTok, we learn all of this language, we have like a way of Googling things, and sometimes we forget that the basic language and how we need to describe a symptom will still get us to the truth of it. So, like symptom tracking from that sense of how does that symptom feel, as opposed to trying to find a name for it from the get go, is one way to symptom track. Um, but I mean, it is a lot about the sad truth is you have to advocate for yourself. You have to do a lot of research and you need to know what research to believe and not to believe. So it's very hard. But one thing I will say is try not to believe everything you see on social media. It is not a one size fits all at all, even if you are diagnosed with the same disease. So try to take all of the questions you have and find a doctor who'll listen to you.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'll definitely come to the social media part of it because I personally have some strong opinions for pro and con against the social media communities. I would love to talk more about the space in endo with AskNomi. So, and you have been in healthcare space. So, what are the advances that you see where people who are tracking their own symptoms and how the physicians or the specialists are reacting with the data that, for example, a platform like AskNomi creates or generates, and how does it get translated clinically?
Yeah, that is a good question. We're still in the process of building out our clinical workflows. So I will report back in a little bit. But based on the user research we've done by talking to physicians and trying to understand how they would want to see it, it goes back to exactly that, right? They want to know the way patients are feeling because they also have an art and science to being able to diagnose someone and they have a way of doing it. Now yes, the system has historically failed women, especially women of color, and I know we're going to talk about that, but it's been so true. So from a patient perspective, you do want to go in with all of the information. A good provider will ideally listen to you and give you the time and space. But the sad truth is, we live in a very broken healthcare system, right? So I would say the translation layer is the most important. And not every physician is going to be open to looking at your wearable data or an app data. That's partly why we're adding care to our platform and we're not doing a app standalone app because we believe that having someone understand the disease is very important and not every physician is made equal. So we actually came to the conclusion that having a physician team to treat our patients as like the primary point of care is the better route to go. Yeah. Yeah. So all of that data will be helpful. Like we're building it in such a way that it's helpful from a patient standpoint to know what recommended interventions worked for them and reduce their pain scores or improve their quality of life. But it is also designed in such a way that when you do have that doctor's appointment, there's an export functionality, right? Like your symptoms are summarized so the doctor has the entire picture of what your symptoms were like for the last couple of months or how many ever, like what your cycles look like. So that's how we plan to use the tracking data.
Let's go to the social media part. I love the social media part where women are now coming and talking boldly about women health issues, the gaps, the dismissal, and everything. And also that, I found you on social media. I found your platform on social media. There's that part. There's also this huge confusion part. And as you
Yeah.
have touched upon, that everybody's experience symptoms are so different and one size won't fit all. So with every information we get, we all obviously have to take it with a grain of salt. But ultimately, going to to a good clinician, to a good group, a good space where your condition is A, accepted, B, discussed without any discrimination, taboo, or judgment is so
Yeah.
important. And I think thank you for creating a space like Ask Know Me where people can come and feel comfortable. So when maybe with the users that you have, is it at what point do they come to you? Is it like after the frustration part with like not being able to get the right answers, or are they like, oh, we found a space, let me stick to it, let me go on this journey along with folks who have similar conditions?
Yeah, that's a good question because we actually are launching as a platform for people diagnosed with endometriosis first, and like giving people the tools for getting to better health after a diagnosis. But as we are adding clinical care, and we'll probably launch in New York and New Jersey first, we will be more open to, okay, if you have any symptoms and you suspect you have endometriosis or PCOS or any other women's health issue, come to us and we'll be able to track your symptoms and get you to a diagnosis or better answers, and then give you the proper care tools and treatment to get to better health. So it would be the entire journey. Hopefully, I'm creating it as like a health passport for women over time. So whichever, like we're starting with endometriosis first. We will then expand into PCOS and other hormonal conditions as well. But the goal is really women go from journey to journey to journey. And even the healthiest woman goes from like getting her period to going through like fertility and pregnancy and postpartum and then menopause, perimenopause and menopause. And that's a woman who's healthy trying to have a kid. For someone who doesn't want to have a child and is healthy, they still go through like at least 4 phases. And so I think it's imperative for us to be able to create a healthcare system that's not episodic, but actually helping people navigate each journey.
Yes, that is such a good point because like, even when I do my research on women's health, I see that with each 5 years or even a decade, the hormones fluctuate so much. And even in a healthy woman, it does change and you have to keep track. And again, with like someone, I have PCOS and I personally have seen that my PCOS has also transformed because now
Yeah.
PCOS is not just looked as ovarian thing. It's a metabolic issue. So I've seen from androgenic PCOS to inflammation PCOS within
Yeah.
myself within a span of a decade. Right now, my androgens are fine, but it was the inflammation. So I dealt with the inflammation. And now I'm sure there'll be something else. And it's a longitudinal tracking that I have to do for my well being. Apart from, yes, we again try to only look at it from the fertility aspect, but I think now with online communities and everything, we are looking at it as a wholesome well-being of a woman.
Yeah, no, 100% true. I feel like people are waking up, and back to the social media piece, right? People are waking up, they're talking about it, they're talking about their periods, they're talking about pain with sex, they're talking about all of these symptoms that were supposed to be taboo that we never talked about out in the open. And it is so refreshing because I was like, wow, I'm really proud of this younger generation and they're really owning it. They're like talking about it. There's no like, they're breaking that taboo in terms of, like being able to speak about it. And they're not okay with the pain. They're like, no, this is not normal. Like, that is so nice to hear. And as
Agreed.
somebody who's like dealt with period pain that is so debilitating in my teens, I'm just like, yes, break the cycle. Come on. This is amazing. And it shows in user research.
Yeah.
When I talked to a lot of women, and once I got into that user research mode, everybody became my research subject. And it was really funny because at parties or wherever I went, like I was getting a massage and my masseuse was telling me about her period. And I just like naturally got into all of these conversations. And not one person was like awkward about it or was like, I won't talk about it. Right. And this is from all walks of life. And I do credit social media for it because social media has made it a much more like less of a taboo and more open, and the awareness about period health has just gotten a little bit out of its comfort zone and into the spotlight and where it needs to be. So I'm really grateful for social media for that, but we can talk about what I'm guessing you and I both share our opinion on the ill effects of social media.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to talk about it or
Yeah, I can. Okay.
please go ahead?
I have so much to say. So, social media, as a patient, when I'm on social media, I feel heard. I feel like, oh, my pain is real. There's a lot of support. There's a lot of good awareness that goes on, and it's great. But also, as a patient who is vulnerable and is trying to find an answer for her weird symptoms, it can be a place that is overwhelming. It can be a place that does peddle in misinformation. I think there was some study, and I don't know what the exact number is, but the study says that misinformation spreads faster than more factual information. And social media is like a great playground for that, right? Like we see that happening so much. And when it comes to health specific information, there are all these fads that take into effect. Some of them are really good and probably will help you. And there is evidence based research on it. In fact, some of the probably didn't have evidence on it. People were talking about it, and then they did a research study, and then there was evidence on it, right? And that could be true. Both can be true, but it is a very scary space for when it is not true. And I don't think that it should be the place that we get care. Like, I fundamentally believe that we should not be peddling medical information and telling each other what we should try unless it's like eating a tomato. Like, it gets a little risky.
Yes, it does, especially in the space of social media too. It's because it can be dangerous. I think people have seen side effects where someone has overconsumed one type of supplement without even knowing what your body is actually deficient in, and getting on this new fad every day. There's a supplement, every day there's a superfood, every day there's this new backbone element that will cure everything. So it's very, very important that yes, we there is a huge gap in the healthcare system too, which needs to be repaired or fixed. But also to be mindful of the social media bizarreness of promoting anything and everything.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the part that I find scary, right? Like somebody also on social media broke it down really well, which is, "Oh, this supplement and this medication are both naturally derived." And there is this like misconception that like a supplement is like more natural and like not as pharmaceutical, which is actually a misnomer. Like, I don't think that is fully true in every case. And a lot of times, another thing that we don't get is that this like drug has gone through medical trials, has gone through some sort of like dosage recommendations, all of that. Now, I am very skeptical of the pharmaceutical industry. Don't get me wrong, because they haven't cared about us as women for the longest time. Till 93, we weren't even in trials, right? So I'm not saying I'm a fan, but I'm saying it has gone through a process and our supplements have gone through none. And they don't need to be FDA approved, right? If I'm not mistaken, to be able to be a supplement. So I am one of those patients who is very open to trying a supplement if there's evidence. And I'm not definitely prey to social media as well. So I'm not going to pretend like I'm above it all. I fall for it sometimes, to be honest. But I'm also married to a physician and he's constantly checking. He's like, where'd you get that information from? And I have to pull up like PubMD and show him. So it's a very interesting balance, but it is very hard as a patient because you want to believe that that supplement is going to solve for your bloating, right? Why wouldn't you want to believe that if somebody is making all these claims, saying they're a patient themselves and they did it? I'm just like, give it to me now. Like, how much do you want me to pay for it? Because it's like a promise to get you out of disability, and you'll take that.
Yeah, yeah. Read with caution, but also I think it's especially with conditions like endo, PCOS. Please go to your clinician. Even
Yes.
if it takes two, three, find someone who will actually listen to you, understand, and be willing to work with your symptoms and give you a program that works for you.
Yeah, 100%. Find a doctor who will care about you and discuss all your crazy ideas with them. Sometimes I have a doctor in India who's so patient. She's amazing. And she will sit and listen to me and help me like figure out what I can and cannot do. So I hope you find a clinician who will take you seriously. And that being said, um, I will tell you a little bit about my like mantra of social media and how I keep myself safe and sane a little bit. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on it as well. So I've decided that I won't take any supplement or anything new if there is something like seed cycling, for example, right? There's not much evidence there. There's some like, I also believe that just those seeds are just healthy for you in general. So you probably have like that effect. So things like that I'm open to. Like if it's real whole foods putting in your body, if it's like a new type of diet that's not too extreme, those are the things I will definitely try. But I will not try new medication or new supplements or order something online that I ingest into my body. Or I'm also skeptical of the other types of thing like devices you get. But I am more curious of some of the wearables that are out in the market that help with like neurostimulation. Um, and vagus nerve stimulation. There is some early research for period pain around those two. I want to try it, but I'm still very skeptical. So I'll report back. But anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, yeah, I think, yeah, same. It's like I am very careful about that, but I'm also curious, right? Like for example, we grew up in India, and we have this beautiful Ayurvedic technique, right? Like ancient
Yes.
technique where people have used it for years. They have their own type of clinical trials where they have worked, right? These are like established or known herbs that have cured. I'm curious to try. Of course, there are specialists that you have to go to. It's not like
Yeah.
I'll eat one spoon of ashwagandha and it'll cure everything, right?
Yeah.
It won't work that way. Yes, I'm curious to like include more food groups in my body. Like I know, like I think as women, we know when our iron is low. We
Yeah.
start getting those symptoms. So I'm like, okay, how can I include more foods that will give me iron?
Yeah.
So I'm more conscious of that. And yes, I sometimes go into the social media rabbit holes of how can I include that in my foods. But
Yeah.
yes, not like a supplement. I'm very, very cautious and wary of that, especially because it's not regulated.
Yeah.
Last thing I want is something that's not regulated in my body. Yeah.
Yeah. No, 100%. Um, yes.
We've touched upon the inclusivity part. So there are so many stats about like brown and black communities not represented well or tested well in many diseases, but especially in women's health. As a woman of color, as a brown person, what has your experiences been, and how do you see it changing?
Yeah, that's a great question because I think about that a lot. As I did a ton of user research, one of the interesting things that I found were that most Black, brown people were not with a diagnosis. They dealt with a lot of period pain, and their path to diagnosis has always been a lot longer. Now, there are some stats out there, and I don't think they're fully researched enough because we don't even get to a diagnosis most of the time. But Black people are more likely to not get a PCOS diagnosis compared to white women. So it's like a 2 time more likely to not get a diagnosis. That's not even like
Yeah.
late or anything like that. So when you start to look at stats like that, it's very hard to like find data on how prevalent it is. But there is a lot of data to show the bias and the racism when it comes to the systemic issue of diagnosing someone with a women's health condition. And the other piece, I think there's another data piece on hysterectomies and Black women. Black women are more likely to be suggested a hysterectomy than white women and go through with it as well at younger ages when it could be avoided. And there's just some weird eugenics behind it, and there's data on it. And I heard it in somebody else's talk, and I'll try to find it and send it to you as well. So maybe we can add that bit. But it's really sad when you see it. because it's not a one off thing, right? This is like a systemic issue that has happened for years on end. So I think that part is very disheartening. But what I do see, and this is coming back to social media, when I did research a long time ago, just talking about like women's health, the word hormonal health was a very privileged thing. And even now, like, yes, hormonal health is not a very accessible term, whereas period pain is. So when you start to look at that difference, you'll also start to find the inequalities. And
Yeah.
social media is closing the gap on that. So that is something that I am looking forward to. We have democratized healthcare language and being able to talk about it, which is really great. And the jury's still out on harm versus good overall. But from a closing the gap perspective and from a race perspective, I do think it's creating a more positive influence.
Yes. Thank you, Shushma, for joining me in having this conversation. I'm sure there are a lot more conversations that are needed. Tell us more about AskNomi. How can we find you? And how can we help you in a way of participating in it?
Yeah, no, thank you for that question. If you love our mission and want to be part of our team, you can come. Like, we have some open roles as well. So, yeah, do sign up. Link in below. Sorry, link in bio. Link below. I think you'll have a link. And if you want to be a tester, you have period pain or you have endometriosis, come be a tester. Come build with us. Tell us what you like. Tell us what you don't like. We love to hear from you. Just dropping a note to us. We're always happy to hear that, especially right now as we're building. Sometimes we have tough days. So that would be really nice. And if you have capital or you are in the investing and the VC space, come invest in us. Tell me how you could write me a check. What metrics are you looking for? So these are the three ways you can be involved. And I hope to see you soon.
Yay, thank you. Thank you so much. Follow Ask Nomi and Well Coded Women for more science-based help. Yeah, yeah. I'll be done by this weekend for sure. Yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Amazing.